you just make it awkward for everyone." My sister's voice sliced through the living room like a shard of ice, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on the arm of Grandma's antique chaise. The family gathering, supposedly to mourn, had devolved into her latest performance, with aunts and uncles nodding along like trained seals. I sat across from her, clutching a faded photo of Grandma and me from her garden last summer, my throat tight as Victoria leaned forward, eyes gleaming with that predatory shine. "Elena's always been the dramatic one. Remember how she cried at the hospital? Pathetic." The room tittered, a chorus of false sympathy. I forced a smile, my fingers tracing the photo's edge until it bit into my skin. Dramatic? Or just the only one who showed up every day? My words hung there, soft but sharp, and for a split second, Victoria's mask cracked, her lips parting in a hiss before she recovered with a laugh that echoed too loud. "My name is Elena Harper, and if you'd told me a year ago that my life would unravel into a tapestry of betrayal, forged signatures, and a single recording that could shatter a family, I'd have laughed it off over coffee with Grandma. She was the one who taught me that roots run deep, even in poisoned soil, that silence isn't weakness, but a blade you sharpen in the dark." We lived in the shadow of the Harper legacy, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Willow Creek, Massachusetts, where the air always smelled of salt from the nearby Atlantic and secrets from the old Victorian house that had been in our family for generations. The estate wasn't just land, it was a living history book, with gabled roofs that creaked like old bones in the wind, wraparound porches where Grandma held court during summer evenings, and hidden dumbwaiters that whispered of Prohibition-era smuggling runs her father had bragged about in hushed tones. Grandma Eleanor wasn't just wealthy, she was a force of nature wrapped in cashmere sweaters and practical brogues. Born in 1932 to Irish immigrants who'd scraped by in Boston's North End tenements, her father a dock worker with hands like weathered oak, her mother a seamstress who mended dreams as often as socks, she'd learned early that fortune favored the bold. At 16, she lied about her age to apprentice at an auction house, her sharp eye spotting undervalued Georgian silver amid the dust. By 25, she'd married Grandpa Harlan, a quiet engineer who built bridges but dreamed of treasures, and together they turned a modest inheritance into a dynasty. He passed young, a heart attack at 48, leaving her the house and a trunk of curiosities that she parlayed into flips, Victorian manors gutted and reborn as boutique hotels, forgotten barns converted to event spaces. By the time I came along, her net worth hovered around $2 million, tied up in the estate's 30 acres of manicured lawns and wild woodlands, a diversified portfolio of blue-chip stocks she'd managed herself with the precision of a surgeon, and a collection of jewelry that could make Sotheby's salivate. There was the emerald ring from a Vanderbilt cast-off, its facets catching light like captured fireflies, the diamond choker that had adorned a silent film star during the Roaring Twenties, and the simple gold locket, engraved with her parents' initials, that she wore every day like a talisman. But money was never the point for Grandma. It was the stories woven into every threadbare tapestry and tarnished teapot. "Wealth is a river, Elena," she'd say, her voice rich with that faint Boston lilt, as we polished silver in the butler's pantry. "It flows if you guide it right, but dam it up with greed, and it floods everything downstream." She'd spin yarns over tea, how she'd haggled a Ming Dynasty vase from a skeptical collector in 1972, the air thick with cigar smoke and bluff, or the time she unearthed a pirate's cache of doubloons in the estate's attic, tucked behind loose paneling like a secret handshake from the past. Those afternoons were my sanctuary, the sun slanting through leaded windows to gild the dust motes as she demonstrated the art of the gentleman's agreement, a nod, a shared glance, the unspoken pact that sealed deals worth fortunes. I was her shadow from the day I could walk, her eager acolyte in a world that had already tried to orphan me twice over. My parents, God rest their souls, were gone before I could form lasting memories of them. Dad, Thomas Harper, was Grandma's only son, a gentle soul with his mother's eyes and his father's wanderlust, who met Mom, Sarah O'Connor, at a folk festival in Cambridge. She was a painter, her canvases alive with swirling Atlantic storms and wildflower meadows, her laugh like wind chimes in a gale. They died on a rain-slicked highway in 1998, when I was 5, a semi-truck hydroplaning into their old Volvo, the kind of freak accident that leaves you questioning if the universe has a grudge. The funeral was a blur of black veils and casseroles that congealed uneaten on plates, relatives murmuring platitudes while eyeing the Harper silver like vultures. Left adrift, I bounced between households like a leaf in a riptide. Dad's side, the Harpers, took me in fits and starts, Aunt Miriam with her pinched lips and endless critiques of my sloppy table manners, Uncle Ted who smelled of aftershave and regret, promising trips to Fenway that never materialized. Mom's family, the O'Connors, were worse, a sprawling Irish clan in Southie who saw me as a living rebuke to their golden boy Tommy, shipping me off to summer camps that felt more like boot camps, where counselors barked orders and mores were rationed. I learned young to pack light, to smile through the ache, to hide the sketchbook where I drew Mom's imagined portraits, her with flowing auburn hair, laughing in a sun-dappled studio. But Grandma? She was the anchor. She stormed the family council meeting like a battleship, her heels clicking on the linoleum of Miriam's kitchen, voice brooking no argument. The child's mine. End of discussion. She scooped me up after the funeral, her arms enveloping me in a cloud of lavender and pipe tobacco, though she swore she'd quit the pipe decades ago, and drove me to the estate in her ancient Cadillac, the engine rumbling like a contented beast. "You're my little root now, Elena," she said, glancing over with eyes that sparkled like the ocean at dawn. "We'll plant you deep, watch you grow tall and twisty around the storms." We did grow together, those early years a blur of wonder and quiet routines. Summers meant the greenhouse, a humid cathedral of glass and green where we'd coax orchids from stubborn bulbs and propagate lavender from clippings she'd smuggled from Provence. I'd perch on a stool too tall for my legs, watching her hands, veined like maps of rivers crossed, prune with surgical grace. "See here, love? A snip too deep, and you kill the heart. Too shallow, and rot sets in. Balance is everything." Winters were firelit vigils in the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound first editions and the grandfather clock that had ticked since her wedding day, its chimes a metronome to her tales. She'd pull me onto her lap, the wool of her skirt scratchy against my cheek, and recount bootleggers who'd hidden gin in the estate's root cellar during the 20s, or the buried treasure, a tin of Confederate gold coins, her father unearthed while digging a well. Those stories weren't just entertainment, they were blueprints for resilience, lessons in spotting fool's gold from the real vein. By high school, I was her full-fledged apprentice, trading awkward teen sleepovers for auctions in Boston's dim-lit halls. I'd catalog lots with a jeweler's loupe, restoring tarnish from Georgian candelabras or appraising the patina on a Chippendale chair that whispered of scandalous liaisons. Grandma taught me the quiet power of patience, how to read a room's undercurrents, the bitter's twitch that betrayed desperation, how to negotiate not with bluster, but with the subtle arch of a brow. People undervalue what's steady, Elena. They chase the flash. Be the oak, they'll lean on you yet. Victoria, my half-sister on Dad's side from his brief, ill-fated first marriage, was the glittering counterpoint to my earthbound world. 8 years my senior, she burst into our lives like a fireworks display gone awry, brash, beautiful, and bound for burnout. Her mother, Lydia Voss, was a social climber with a model's cheekbones and a gambler's instincts. She'd ensnared a young Thomas Harper at a debutante ball, shotgun wedding, and all, only to decamp to Manhattan when the alimony checks proved insufficient for her tastes. Victoria inherited the cheekbones and the instincts, but none of the caution. Raised in a series of apartments that escalated from walk-ups to lofts as Lydia's modeling gigs waxed and waned, she arrived at the estate for visits like a visiting dignitary, trailing Louis Vuitton luggage and demands for the good china. Our rivalry ignited early, a slow smolder fed by her barbs and my silence. I'd catch her in Grandma's study, rifling drawers for spare cash or borrowing earrings that never returned, her perfume, a cloying cloud of Chanel No. 5, lingering like an accusation. During family dinners, she'd regale the table with tales of her adventures, internships at fashion houses that ended in firings, boyfriends with trust funds who vanished like smoke, while sidelining me with quips. "Elena's so domestic," she'd say, spearing asparagus with unnecessary vigor. "Potting plants while the world's spinning. Adorable." The aunts would chuckle, Uncle Ted would pour more wine, and I'd retreat to the kitchen, scrubbing pots until my knuckles bled, Grandma's hand eventually finding my shoulder. "Let her thorns snag her own silk, dear. Roses wilt, oaks endure. But Grandma saw through the glamour to the rot beneath. Vicky's got the bloom, but no roots, she'd confide over midnight cocoa, the estate's halls groaning with settling timbers. She'll chase the sun till it burns her. You've got the depth. It was a balm, that faith, sustaining me through the cruelties, the high school rumor mill she'd kick-started during a visit, whispering to my classmates that I was Grandma's charity case, the loan she dangled for my prom dress only to retract it with a smirk, can't fund pity parties, sis. Even in college, at the state university where I majored in art history on scholarships and waitressing shifts, her shadow loomed, emails CC'd to Grandma, painting my straight A's as grinding away in the mud while I'm out conquering. Yet there were flickers of something softer, rare as a blue moon. The time she crashed at the estate after a brutal breakup, her mascara-streaked face buried in my shoulder as we shared a bottle of Grandma's bootleg mead in the gazebo. Men are pigs, Elena. All of them. I held her then, stroking her hair like a sister should, only for her to ghost me for 6 months after, emerging with a new brand ambassador gig for a skincare line that folded in scandal. Grandma shook her head over the morning paper. Thorns, love. Sharp going in, sharper coming out. The cancer came like a thief in the autumn of 2023, starting as a persistent cough that Grandma waved off as the damp from the shore. We were knee-deep in harvest, the estate's orchards heavy with Macintosh apples that we'd press into cider under a canopy of turning leaves. She powered through, her laughter still booming at the local fair where she judged the pie contest, awarding blue ribbons with a wink and a biased eye for Mrs. Patel's cardamom spiced entry. But by Thanksgiving, the cough had deepened to a rattle, and a routine chest X-ray at Willow Creek General revealed the shadow, stage 3 lung cancer, aggressive, rooted in the pipe tobacco she'd romanticized but never fully forsaken. The diagnosis hit like a nor'easter, winds howling off the Atlantic as we sat in the oncologist's office, the fluorescent lights buzzing like angry hornets. Grandma gripped my hand, her rings digging crescents into my palm. Well, Rootling, she rasped, forcing that trademark grin, looks like I've got some weeding to do. Victoria arrived the next day, sweeping in from a networking retreat in the Hamptons, arms laden with glossy self-help books on warrior mindsets and a juicer that promised alkaline miracles. Mom, Lydia, swore by this for her detox, she said, plugging it in with a flourish while ignoring the 4-pole in the corner of Grandma's bedroom, now converted to a makeshift sickroom. Hospice followed swiftly, the estate's east wing transformed into a sanctuary of beeping monitors and soft lamplight. I quit my part-time gig at the local museum, curating exhibits on colonial craftsmanship, to be there full-time, sleeping on a cot beside her 4-poster bed, the canopy draped like a weary sail. Days blurred into a rhythm of caregiving. Dawn walks in the wheelchair along the crushed shell paths, where we'd identify late-blooming asters and debate the merits of hybrid roses versus heirlooms. Afternoons of broth spooning and morphine adjustments, her stories growing fainter but no less vivid. Remember the shipwreck pearls, Elena? Washed up after the 38 hurricane, your great-grand a dove for them himself, lungs burning like the devil's forge. I'd nod, throat tight, reading aloud from her dog-eared Rebecca, Manderley's shadows mirroring the ones creeping across her face, or playing recordings of Irish fiddles on an old gramophone, the notes curling like smoke. Victoria's visits were performances, timed for maximum optics. She'd breeze and bi-weekly, post-meeting, with catered charcuterie boards that wilted untouched and anecdotes from her latest venture, a sustainable wine label sourced from Napa vines she couldn't pronounce. Grandma, I've got investors lined up, your estate could be the perfect vineyard venue, she'd pitch, perched on the vanity stool, scrolling Zillow for synergies while I adjusted the oxygen mask. Grandma's eyes would glaze, but she'd muster a pat on Victoria's knee. Sounds grand, Vicky. But save your breath for the living. Alone with me in the quiet hours, as the sun dipped blood orange over the tree lean, she'd whisper fiercer truths. You're my legacy, Elena. The steady one, the deep-rooted. The will, it's yours. All of it, the house, the collections, the funds. To grow what we've planted, not squander it on thorns. Tears would prick, but she made me promise, fierce as a vow. Fight if they come clawing, love. And remember, silence is your soil. let it nurture the blade. Her lawyer, Mr. Reginald Hargrove, a septuagenarian with wire-rimmed glasses perpetually fogged from his eternal cup of Earl Grey, and bow ties knotted with the precision of a hangman, came that very week. We gathered in the solarium, the domed glass ceiling fracturing the January light into prisms, Grandma propped on pillows amid the ferns. He drafted the codicil on the spot, her signature a looping flourish that defied the tremors in her hand. I witnessed, my own hand steady as I pressed the notary seal, while Victoria lounged in the hallway, earbuds in, oblivious to the ink drying on her exclusion. She passed on a crystalline February morning in 2024, the snow falling in fat, silent flakes that muffled the estate like a requiem. I'd been up all night, her breathing a labored symphony fading to stillness around 4:17 a.m., the clock's chime marking the end like a tolling bell. I held her then, the room scented with wilting lilies and the faint copper of farewell, whispering the lullabies she'd sung to me as a child. Hush now, my bairn, the wind's in the willows. Mrs. Patel found us at dawn, her sari rustling as she crossed herself and began the quiet rituals, calling the hospice nurse, brewing strong tea laced with cardamom to steady my shakes. The funeral was Victoria's masterpiece, a spectacle that would have made P.T. Barnum envious. Black limos snaked up the oyster shell drive like a funeral cortege from a Gothic novel, disgorging relatives I'd long forgotten, second cousins from Dublin with brogues thick as peat, distant aunts from Florida dripping in costume jewelry. Victoria orchestrated every detail, the mahogany casket blanketed in white lilies imported from Holland, the eulogy she delivered in the estate's chapel, her voice quivering just so as she painted herself the devoted granddaughter. Nana's fire lives in us all, but especially in those who chased dreams beside her, like me, launching ventures in her honor. The reception sprawled across the great hall, crystal clinking under chandeliers that Grandma had restored herself, champagne toasts sloshing like false tears. I stood at the periphery, numb in a wool coat that smelled of mothballs, clutching the urn we'd use later for the garden scattering, her ashes to nourish the roses she'd loved so fiercely. 2 weeks later, the bomb detonated in the solarium, that fishbowl of light where secrets always surfaced. Victoria had called the family meeting with imperious texts, gold-embossed invitations arriving by courier, scented with her perfume. The clan assembled, Aunt Miriam with her perpetual scowl etched deeper by widowhood, clutching a lace hanky like a weapon, Uncle Ted, ruddy-cheeked and nursing a flask disguised as a hip flask, his eyes darting for the bar, cousins in clusters, whispering about stock tips and summer shares. I arrived last, slipping in like a shadow in my threadbare black dress, the hospital photo of Grandma and me, her frail hand on my cheek, burning a hole in my pocket. Victoria unfurled the papers with a magician's flourish, her silk blouse whispering against the wicker settee. Grandma entrusted me with this, she announced, voice honeyed with authority, the kind that brooked no questions. The official reading, straight from her heart. Miriam leaned in, bifocals slipping down her nose. Well, don't keep us in suspense, girl. Clearing her throat theatrically, Victoria intoned, I, Eleanor Harper, being of sound mind and unyielding spirit, do hereby bequeath my entire estate, properties encompassing the Willow Creek Manor and ancillary holdings, financial assets approximating $2 million, and personal collections of appreciable value, to my eldest granddaughter, Victoria Lydia Harper. This bequest acknowledges her unwavering support during my final days, her keen business acumen, and her embodiment of the Harper drive to innovate and expand. She paused, letting the words sink like lead, her eyes locking onto mine with laser precision. Remaining assets shall be divided equitably among lesser heirs, with nominal bequests. Elena receives the greenhouse and its contents, a fitting tribute to her horticultural inclinations. Laughter bubbled up, nervous at first from the cousins, then crueler from Ted's guffaw, Miriam's approving nod. Practical at last, Eleanor. Vicky'll turn that old pile into gold. A cousin chimed in, greenhouse for Elena? Poetic, keeps her in the dirt where she thrives. The air thickened, my chest a vice of betrayal and bile. Unwavering support? Victoria's visits had been 3 in 6 months, one for a photo op with the juicer, another to pitch her wine folly, the last a hurried dash 4 blessings on a loan that never circled back. Business acumen? Her track record was a graveyard of flops, a pop-up gallery shuttered for unpaid rent, a wellness app sued for plagiarized yoga flows. And me, useless? I'd been the marrow, the nights I'd massaged her swollen feet when edema set in, the mornings advocating with doctors for adjusted chemo drips, the endless afternoons holding the basin as nausea racked her, whispering, "I've got you, roots hold." Victoria's gaze pinned me, triumphant, her lips curving like a scimitar. "Face it, Elena, you're useless anyway. Always the tag-along, the pity project. Grandma kept you for the optics, the good deed. But now? The real Harper takes the reins. Congrats on your weeds, sis." Cheers erupted, glasses clinking like mocking bells, backs slapped in congratulations. I stood frozen, the photo's edges crumpling in my fist, and forced my lips to mirror hers, a smile steady as forged steel. "Congrats," I echoed, voice a silken thread over razor wire. Inside, the serpent stirred, uncoiling in the dark. They saw awkward Elena, the crier, the clinger. Let them. The thorns were hers, the blade was mine. The real reading awaited, and with it, the bloom of truth. And the fevered days that followed, the estate morphed from sanctuary to siege ground, bureaucracy's fog cloaking Victoria's conquest. She moved in with the speed of a squatter claiming squatters' rights, her fleet of Louis Vuitton suitcases cluttering the foyer like captured flags, her advisory team, a ragtag crew of LinkedIn connections with paralegal certs from community colleges and influencers hawking crypto schemes, swarming the ledgers like locusts. By week's end, she'd changed the locks on the guest wing, citing security protocols for valuable assets, her email to the family CCing me with a winking emoji. "Can't have just anyone wandering, Elena, insurance nightmare." Zoxo. The staff, lifelong loyalties forged in Grandma's kitchen, faced the guillotine, NDAs thrust under noses, pink slips for those who balked. Mrs. Patel, the housekeeper who'd immigrated from Mumbai in '85 and braided my hair with jasmine blooms during childhood summers, held out longest. "That girl thinks paper tigers scare me," she muttered one dusk, as I lurked by the garden gate, pretending to mournweed the borders. She slipped me a skeleton key through the ivy, her dark eyes fierce with unshed tears. "Fight for her, Beta. Nana's soul is in these walls, she's watching from the jasmine vines." I pocketed the key, gratitude a lump in my throat, and vanished into the twilight, the estate's lanterns flickering like wary eyes. That night, in the cramped one-bedroom I'd sublet above Tomasi's bakery in downtown Willow Creek, a space that reeked eternally of rising dough and regret, its walls papered in faded florals and the single window framing the harbor's restless waves, I began the quiet war. By day, I pulled doubles at the bakery, sleeves rolled to elbows as I kneaded rye loaves with pent-up fury, the steam from the ovens mirroring the haze in my mind. Tomasi, the octogenarian owner with flour-dusted whiskers and a philosopher's bent, would slide me extra cannoli during lulls. Revenge is like focaccia, ragazza, layer it slow, let the salt bite at the end. Nights were for strategy, the kitchen table a war room lit by a gooseneck lamp that cast long shadows. Grandma's true will, ironclad as New England granite, had been filed with Hargrove pre-decline, dated January 12, witnessed by his clerk and a notary with impeccable credentials, leaving the estate wholesale to me, to the granddaughter who has tended my roots with unwavering care, ensuring the Harper legacy blooms for generations. I'd couriered copies from Hargrove's office, his gravelly voice crackling over the line, "Miss Harper, this forgery of your sister's is a house of cards and a gale, signatures waver like a drunkard's, the notary stamp post dates your grandmother's last coherent afternoon by a fortnight. We'll dismantle it brick by felonious brick." But dissection revealed amateur arrogance, the paper stock mismatched the originals, a faint Xerox ghost haunting the edges, clauses cribbed verbatim from a template site, with Victoria's innovative expansions tacked on like a bad sequel. And the confession, the jewel in the crown, a digital dagger I'd forged in desperation, it unfolded the night after her solarium coup, grief and rage propelling me through the estate's perimeter like a spectre unbound. The moon hung low, a silver sickle over the dunes, as I scaled the garden wall, calluses from greenhouse work making the ivy grip easy, childhood games of hide-and-seek honing the stealth. I dropped into the rose arbor, thorns snagging my jeans like vengeful fingers, the air heavy with damask perfume and salt brine. Voices drifted from the gazebo. Victoria, ensconced on the wicker throne with a crystal tumbler of Grandma's aged scotch, phone on speaker to her crony, a nasal voice I pegged as Blaine, the realtor beau she'd paraded at the funeral. God, Blaine, it was pathetically easy, she crowed, laughter bubbling like champagne gone flat. Scanned the old draft from Hargrove's leak, tweaked it in Photoshop over mimosa brunch, swapped the names, forged the sig with a steady hand and a prayer. Boom, 2 mil, the house, the lot. Elena? That mousy little shadow didn't bat an eye. Useless as tits on a bull, always has been. Remember how she bawled at the hospice? Oh, Nana, hold on. Pathetic. Grandma would have hated her inheriting, too soft, too stuck in the mud. But me? I'm the empire builder. Watch me flip this relic into a boutique hotel chain. My heart thundered, a war drum in the dark, but I fumbled my phone from my pocket, thumb swiping to record before panic could paralyze. Her soliloquy unspooled, bribes to a disbarred notary in Lynn, $5,000 and a Birkin, the fool jumped, threats to Uncle Ted, tell the family it's real, or your gambling debts hit the light of day, the casual rewrite of history, senile at the end, anyway. Let Elena have the dirt pit, suits her weedy soul. The call ended with smacking kisses and promises of celebratory caviar, and I slipped away unseen, thorns raking my arms like applause. The file auto-saved as vtruth.mp3, 6 minutes of unvarnished venom. It was my Excalibur, but I sheathed it deep. Revenge, Grandma intoned in memory, is a slow-brewed Irish stew, onions sweated low, potatoes layered thick, spices introduced in whispers until the whole simmers to a bite that lingers. I played it once, alone in the bakery's walk-in cooler amid sacks of semolina, her voice echoing off the chill metal, testing the weight, the wound. Then locked it away, turning instead to the grind, legal tomes from the Willow Creek Library, their pages dog-eared by generations of property squabbles, cross-referenced against Victoria's farce. Hargrove fed me intel via burner emails, trails of her dipping estate accounts for consulting fees, sales of heirlooms logged sloppily, the Ming vase, that azure-glazed sentinel from the Qing dynasty, pawned for $15,000 to fund a Birkin binge, Grandma's sapphire brooch, a 1920s Art Deco stunner with paved diamonds like frozen tears, flipped on eBay to a Russian collector for quick cash. Life in exile sharpened me, the apartment's confines a forge for resolve. Mornings dawned with harbor fog pressing against the pane, the bakery's bell tinkling as fishermen shuffled in for espresso and cornetti. I'd rise at 4 a.m., brew chicory coffee strong as resolve, Grandma's recipe, chicory root roasted dark for that bitter edge, and journal the barbs, not just Victoria's useless, but the echoes from childhood, the foster aunt who called me poor thing like a curse, the high school clique that dubbed me Ghost Harper for my quiet haunts in the library. Flashbacks ambushed during shifts, the college loan she'd weaponized, yanking it mid-semester to teach resilience, forcing me to pawn Mom's locket for tuition, the breakup night in the gazebo, her sobs turning to sneers by dawn. Don't get ideas, Elena, you're the fallback, not the fix. Yet fire kindled in the embers. I recalled the auction where I'd outbid a smug dealer for a tarnished silver Ypern, restoring it to glory and earning Grandma's nod, that's my oak. Or the scholarship essay that won me full ride, penned in the estate's attic amid dust motes and determination. Her letters sustained, tucked in a cedar box, yellowed envelopes postmarked from her travels, ink fading but words eternal. Roots bend in the gale, love, but they don't break. Twist toward the light. As spring tentatively thawed Willow Creek, the crocuses pushing defiant through snowmelt, gulls wheeling over unfurling buds, Victoria's facade fissured. Whispers slithered from the staff, routed through Mrs. Patel's clandestine drops at the bakery back door, lavish parties in the Great Hall, influencers posing with the grandfather clock for #Harper Heritage Reels, only to trash the linens and vanish at dawn. Heirlooms vanished too, the Vanderbilt emerald ring, pried from its velvet case for a pop-up gala that netted more hangovers than bids. Uncle Ted, her bulldog ally, grew squirrely after my anonymous packet, photocopies of the notary's revoked license, headlines of his fraud bust in the Globe. His calls to Victoria tapered, mine he answered with slurred apologies, didn't know, kiddo. Vicky said. Aunt Miriam cornered me at the AP one drizzly April afternoon, her cart rammed against mine in the cereal aisle, boxes of Cheerios toppling like dominoes. Elena, I've heard, murmurs. Vicky's selling off pieces, the clock, was it? Eleanor's heart. Her scowl softened to something like contrition, eyes darting as if walls had ears. I shrugged, hefting a sack of flour for the bakery, water beating on my hood. Murmurs are just wind, Aunt Mere. Batten the hatches, the storm's brewing. The will reading proper was decreed for May 15th, Hargrove's oak-paneled office in the heart of downtown, a bastion of mahogany and leather-bound precedents, the air redolent of aged vellum and unyielding justice. Invitations dispatched with fanfare, cream stock, gold-embossed, bearing the seal of estate executors, a neutral front to lure the fox to the snare. Victoria swept in at the stroke of 10, radiant in emerald silk that mocked the ring she'd hawked, arm laced with Blaine, tall, tanned, his realtor's grin appraising the room like square footage. The family trickled after, Ted hungover and hollow-eyed, flask peeking from his tweed, Miriam pro-clutching, her hanky now a talisman, cousins in a chattering phalanx, phones primed for the windfall. I glided in last, unremarkable in a charcoal shift cinched at the waist, hair coiled in a chignon that echoed Grandma's hospice poise, my phone a talisman in my clutch, charged, synced, lethal. Hargrove presided from his throne-like desk, spectacles perched like a hawk's gaze, bow tie a jaunty plaid against his vested severity. Ladies and gentlemen, he intoned, voice a gavel's echo, we convene to probate the authentic last will and testament of Eleanor Agnes Harper, executed January 12, 2024, in the presence of sound witnesses and under my direct supervision. Murmurs swelled, Victoria's forgery bore an April imprimatur, a slip she'd dismissed as updated vision. Miriam's pearls clicked like castanets. Ted shifted, flask glugging audibly. Hargrove proceeded with measured gravitas, the clauses unfolding like a well-rehearsed soliloquy, the estate in toto to Elena Marie Harper, for her embodiment of resilience, quiet stewardship, and the unyielding spirit that sustained my twilight years, bequests to charities Grandma cherished, the Willow Creek Food Pantry, Irish Heritage Scholarships at Boston College, totaling 20% of liquid assets, modest legacies to the family, $10,000 apiece, with ironclad no-contest clauses to deter the grasping. Victoria's complexion leached to ash, her laugh a brittle shard. This is absurd, a draft, an oversight. We have the paramount document, Hargrove, you know, the one Nana signed in her final clarity. She brandished her sheaf, Blaine nodding like a bobblehead. Clarity? Hargrove's retort cracked like ice underfoot. Indeed, Ms. Harper, and forensic analysis deems it a fabrication of egregious intent. But prior to enumerating civil remedies and criminal referrals. His gaze flicked to me, a conspirator's glint. I rose, pulse a tattoo against my ribs, and extended the phone, a slim black obelisk of reckoning. If you'd indulge track 3, counsel. The room ossified as Hargrove synced to the Bluetooth speaker, a vintage Bose humming to predatory life. Victoria's voice erupted, unfiltered venom filling the sanctum. God, it was easy, scanned the old will, tweaked it in Photoshop, forged it, easy. Elena? Useless, let her have the dirt. Collective inhalation, gasp a hydra-headed beast. Blaine recoiled, his arm disengaging like a severed limb. Ted spluttered water across his lapel, droplets scattering like fleeing rats. Miriam's pearls yielded, beads skittering across the Persian rug in accusatory hail. Cousins froze mid-scroll, screens forgotten. Victoria lunged, talons outstretched, lies. Dr. Drivel, that. But Hargrove's associates, two stone-faced juniors with tablets aglow, intercepted, Hargrove's palm upthrust like a magistrate's decree. Forensics authenticate, Ms. Harper, spectral analysis matches your vocal print, timestamps align with the Arbor's security cam, subtly triggered, I note, by a certain visitor's ingress. His tone chilled further. Moreover, financial traces link you to the notary's payoff, and estate disbursements reveal unauthorized withdrawals exceeding $150,000. This tableau constitutes forgery in the first degree, uttering false instruments, and prima facie elder financial exploitation. Constables are, as we speak, ascending the stairs. She deflated, a punctured dirigible, mascara rivers carving war paint defeat down her cheeks. Elena. You slithering eavesdropper? You taped me, like some tabloid hack? Her whisper was a serpent's hiss, Blaine edging toward the credenza'd. I held her stare, the oak's calm infusing my veins, Grandma's promise manifest. Thorns, Vicky. You sowed them deep. I merely let the garden tend itself. The deluge was apocalyptic, justice's torrent scouring the facade clean. Victoria spent that night in a holding cell at the county lockup, her silk traded for an orange jumpsuit that clashed with her complexion, arraigned at dawn on a litany of felonies, forgery, fraud, embezzlement, with elder abuse enhancers that turned the screw. Her team scattered like roaches to dawn, Blaine decamping to a rival firm in Providence, citing ethical conflicts, his parting tweet a mealy-mouthed wishing all parties healing. The social media citadel crumbled, #HarperEris trended briefly as a punchline, influencers unfollowing en masse, her last Insta live, a tearful plea from a courthouse bathroom, garnering pity likes before the Bannerman fell for TOS violations. The family splintered like fault lines in granite. Uncle Ted materialized at my door 3 days post-recording, sober for the first time in a decade, a manila envelope clutched like contrition. Kiddo, blinded by the shine. Here's what I skimmed, $25,000, clean wire. And the truth? Vicky leaned on me hard, debts from the track. Forgiven old fool? I accepted the envelope, not the absolution, yet, directing the funds to the food pantry in his sister's name. Miriam's overtures were tea rituals in her chintz parlor, probing queries veiled as scones. Elena, dear, how might we rebuild bridges? The will's yours, but family. I sipped Earl Grey, responses measured as mercury. Bridges need sound footings, Aunt Mere. Time will tell if the soil holds. Cousins? A diaspora of avoidance, holiday cards unsigned, group chats muted. One, young Liam from Dublin, bucked the tide, a transatlantic call, his brogue warm as peat fire. Heard the kerfuffle, cuz. Nana'd be proud, oaks over roses, I? Sent a bit from the old sod for the gardens. The check, €5,000, went to Hybrid Rose Trials, a thornless variety in her honor. Reclamation of the estate was a symphony of restitution, each note a stitch mending the tear. The morning after charges stuck, I drove the Cadillac up the drive, key from Patel turning smooth as fate, the house exhaling like a sleeper roused. Mrs. Patel enveloped me in the foyer, sorry whispering, chai bubbling on the aga. Beta, the walls wept without you. Come, Nana's roses need their mistress. We toured the ravages, gouges in parquet from stilettos, the library's shelves askew from hasty purges. But the heart endured, the clock ticking defiant, the greenhouse's panes fogged with promise. Restoration unfurled as therapy, a balm for the soul's abrasions. I rehired the staff wholesale, salaries doubled from the portfolio's yields, Patel to head housekeeper with veto on Renos, the gardener reinstated to reclaim the wilds. The mean vase? Hargrove's PI traced it to a Back Bay pawnshop, repurchased at auction for $18,000, its azure glow restored under museum lights, centerpiece of a revived collection. The sapphire brooch surfaced via Interpol tip, wrested from a Moscow fence. I wore it to Grandma's private memorial, a scattering in the rose garden under June's full moon, petals drifting on whispers as I read her favorite Yeats. When you are old and gray and full of sleep, slash and nodding by the fire, take down this book. The house breathed anew, its bones invigorated. I flung open the doors for communal rebirth, antique restoration workshops for Willow Creek's latchkey kids, hammers and polish turning awkward hands to artisans, grief circles in the solarium, survivors sharing under the dome's prismatic grace, the air scented with healing herbs. The town hummed, the Willow Creek Gazette ran a spread, Harper Air reclaims legacy, from forgery to flourish, my photo amid the roses, smile tentative but true. Scholarships bloomed in Grandma's name, 10 annually for art history majors from immigrant stock, first recipients including a Southie girl with O'Connor fire. Victoria's trial sprawled into October's amber haze, the county courthouse a coliseum of polished oak and echoing gavels. I testified once, mid-September, the stand of spotlights glare on my gray wool suit, voice a steady rivulet over the recording's replay, her words booming from speakers like judgment's echo, the jury's faces hardening from doubt to disdain. She glared from the dock, gaunt in a tailored navy that hung loose, gloss stripped to skeletal spite. During recess, in the marbled hall scented of floor wax and desperation, she cornered me by the vending machine, quarters clinking futilely. "You always hated me, didn't you?" The perfect little shadow, poisoning the well. I met her eyes, hollows bruised as overripe plums, and replied soft as falling leaves. "Hate your vintage, Vicky, aged in resentment." I merely stepped from the shade. Verdict: guilty across the board, forgery, fraud, embezzlement, 5 years probation with mandatory restitution of $500,000 payable in quarterly drips, a felony brand that scorched her entrepreneurial aspirations to ash. She slunk to a walk-up in Dorchester's fringes, last whispers from mutuals painting her hawking artisanal soaps at farmers' markets, irony's lash, her pitches now laced with humility's bitter aftertaste. As winter's mantle settled once more, snow veiling the estate in hush, I claimed the fireside vigil, Grandma's wingback chair, its leather softened by decades, the clocks tick a heartbeat renewed. The 2 million? A seedbed, scholarships seeded, gardens expanded with adaptive plots for the disabled, a staff trust vesting retirements in gold. But the true coffers brimmed with quietude, no more spotlights, no more erasures. Just roots, delving deep, branches arching toward tempests unnamed. I in the gloaming hush, her laugh ghosts sometimes, lavender laced with pipe smoke, a chuckle at my latest folly. Well played, little root. Now, grow wild. Yet tales like ours defy neat epilogues, vengeance's harvest yields thorns yet. A letter winged last month, postmarked from a Boston halfway house, Victoria's script, once loopy flourish, now cramped as confession. Elena, the fall stripped me bare. Wrong about you, about everything. The hate? Mine alone. Can we talk? Replant? I fed it to the hearth, flames devouring to please, ashes eddying up the flue like exorcised specters. Forgiveness? A seed, perhaps, for spring's thaw. Trust? That's a hothouse bloom, nurtured slow, and I, Elena Harper, forged from useless shade to steadfast canopy, stand as the oak. Branches broad, roots entwined, ready for the gales that whisper on the wind.